Hello and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be talking about something I think is very important in Warlords of Draenor, and that is upping your game and being better. And not really just the kind of muscle memory being better, no, just being better by making a conscious decision to actually stop being lazy and start giving a shit. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we're all lazy, but, you know, Mists of Pandaria didn't really reinforce some important things in the game. And with mechanics, we could get kind of lazy, you know, we could just sort of troll our way through a lot of content, but in Warlords of Draenor, that's not going to be the case. So now that we are so close to this expansion's launch, I think that it's just a really good time to throw this video out there and just, you know, let everyone know that there's a bit of a mindset change that needs to happen. Now, it's probably worth just saying at the start, though, that if all you want to do is normal dungeons and looking for raid stuff, then it's going to be just the same as Mists of Pandaria. There will be no real difference in content. The Draenor LFR is still pretty easy, and the Draenor normals, while they are maybe a little bit harder than some of the Pandaria stuff, the Pandaria normals, they are really the same difficulty as the Pandaria heroics. Basically, they're really darn easy. So this is all pretty okay for those people, but what Blizzard have done really just an excellent job with in Warlords is adding content, or at least just designing mechanics and then having the confidence to not absolutely butcher them, so that there's actually decent or a meaty gameplay there for those of us who want that gameplay. So heroic dungeons are going to be pretty tricky. Well, pretty tricky for most people, especially in comparison to the mop variety of heroics. Are they as hard as Cataclysm? No, they are not, but that, I would argue, is a good thing, and worry not, because the Cataclysm heroic difficulty will basically exist in the form of Warlords of Draenor challenge modes, which will give you appropriate gear rewards, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so the thing about all of these, new dungeons and challenge modes and stuff, is that the mechanics matter quite a bit more, and it's really going to demand quite a lot more out of every single role in the game. I know that as a DPS player, I've had to be, paying attention to interrupting things a lot more. I think a good example actually was just, it was last night actually, no, it was 2 nights ago. I was running Everbloom on my Shaman. Of course, this is like my first dungeon ever as a Shaman, but, even with that, there was ads to kill, there's stuff to interrupt, and it wasn't just interrupting stuff, whenever you see the cast bar. No, they have mobs which will do loads of interruptible abilities, but make it so that you only really want to interrupt one. Essentially, they'll throw in lots of red herrings, so you need to be watching the bosses and understanding their mechanics to know what to interrupt. That actually occurs in 2 bosses of the Everbloom, and it occurs in many bosses just throughout the other dungeons as well. Even the final boss of the Everbloom involves quite a bit of movement, involves the tank repositioning things on top of fire, and just in general, there's a lot more going on, and it does demand a lot more of the player than what was going on in Mists of Pandaria. Then moving on, the challenge modes, from what I have heard, are very tricky, just like the gold ones at the very start of MoP. I unfortunately have not got much of a chance to test these out because I haven't really had a pre-made group to do that stuff with on the beta. Hopefully that'll change, but still, what I've heard about these, and certainly what I've seen, is that they again are very hard, and of course they're being built upon the same mechanics as the heroics, so you can pretty much tell what they're going to be like. This is all very good news. Yes, it is going to demand a good bit more effort from all of us, but I think that's a good thing. We definitely will need to be a lot more awake during the Warlords of Draenor content. And that's really good, because do you know what happened in Pandaria sometimes? I literally was sort of nearly falling asleep, and that's never a good thing in content. I'm not saying I was falling asleep because I'm just such a god tier player. No, that's not true. I fell asleep because the stuff was just so bloody undertuned and easy and weak that no one would really have to pay any attention to just completely win. So yeah, that's what's going on the dungeon front. Essentially, Warlords is going to ask a lot more of you, and the great thing about this is that it's going to train people up the right way. People are going to be going through dungeons, learning about interrupting. They're going to be learning about not standing in various forms of crap. And essentially just, there's been this, I guess, really big emphasis on the mechanics of every single fight, to the point where it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to just YOLO your way through these fights. No, everyone will have to pay attention and understand what they're doing. And this is just such a great change in design from Pandaria. I feel like the very start of Pandaria was just trying to make dungeons that could appeal to absolutely anyone. Whereas, you know, of course, what happened there is it just alienated the people who wanted good content because it was just all so stupidly easy that you didn't really have to apply your brain. Of course, the change, though, in Warlords means that you'll have a better population of people going into raiding, and I think that even a lot of raiders will get a little bit of a wake-up call. The reason I call this video Upping Your Game is because I think many of us have got a little bit lazy. For an example, Trank Shot. That's the thing you should have in your bars, hunters. Yeah, I know, Trank Shot. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on that really you can pay attention to, and there'll be a lot of times, I think, in these Warlords of Draenor dungeons and things like that, where maybe you'll be the best person there simply by virtue of the fact that you know you need to up your game and that you know that this content is comparatively a lot harder. I've seen many instances on the beta where you get Pandaria tanks who just, you know, pull 3 or 4 packs of mobs and then bitch and moan about how the group's all dead. And it's like, well, you pulled way too much stuff. There's no way the healer could cope with this. But they say, oh, MFG, healer, you're terrible. OMG, you, not CC, etc, etc. Well, no. You'll see a lot of things like that where there's just sort of poor players. And what's going to have to happen is that at least initially, a lot of people are going to have to lead by example. I don't think this is going to be as bad as the whole Cataclysm Dungeons situation, but certainly if you are aware of the higher difficulty, then you'll just need to appropriately tune up your gameplay so that you really are making sure that you're doing everything in your power to make the run a bit more palatable for everyone. So that means interrupt stuff. Assume that other people won't, and then interrupt stuff, and try to get that locked down by yourself. If there's something that can be removed with, say, Trank Shot, or anything that removes magic effects, do that. And just in general, you know, try to educate people. I'll have guides in the channel, I'd recommend watching those, and I'll have like a little TLDR thingy for every fight, so spreading that around, and not the guide itself, but the TLDR message, you know, those things could help. Of course, many other people have guides, I recommend checking that stuff out as well. But yeah, this is just going to be one of those times where if a whole bunch of us just kind of walk in as badasses and try not to be, you know, dicks to the people who are sort of struggling a little bit, then everyone can come out the better. And everyone can learn, and hopefully it's just going to lead to a better player base, because by crafting more difficult content with mechanics that matter, essentially what can happen is that Blizzard could up the game of a large subset of the player base. What does that mean for the future? Well, it hopefully means that you end up with a player base that's more receptive of harder content. And in general, harder content means content where the mechanics matter more. And you know what's fun? Dealing with mechanics that actually matter, and not just, as I said earlier, YOLOing your way through the whole thing, not really having a care in the world about what the hell the boss is doing. It's just good that all this stuff seems to be going on and happening so far. Now let's talk about raiding in Warlords of Draenor. Well, raiding is, I mean, it's similar enough to the Pandaria model of doing things in that, well, just the boss design, it certainly feels like it's being designed by the same team, if you know what I mean. However, I still think that the bosses are very good, they're very well designed, and it just continues Blizzard's sort of way of designing bosses where they just are putting more emphasis on some of the various, you know, mechanical things of the fights, and I think that's really good. And a lot of the lessons that people will learn from these dungeons will certainly apply in the raids. Do you remember that achievement? Was it Ready for Raiding or something that you got from one of the dungeons in Cataclysm? Well, it just feels like the entire entryway into raiding in Warlords of Draenor is kind of ready for raiding. It really will train you up well, and it's going to train you up well in content that's really fun. Because the Warlords dungeons, like, they're some of the best that Blizzard have ever made. It's a pity there's not more of them, but they are great. They are really great. So yeah, that's the end of this video. I think that's really all I want to cover. Covered, you know, stuff's harder, mechanics matter more. You really need to get into the nitty-gritty of your class. Now that there's been an ability prune, you can have a look at your spellbook, and you know some of those abilities that would have been only useful once in a while? That you just kind of forgot you had, or, you know, just put away because you never really needed them in Pandaria. Well, it might be worth taking those things back out again and seeing if they're any good, and seeing if you can maybe apply them to some sort of fight in a dungeon so that you can help out the group. Now, the reason I say all this, by the way, is because I need to do this shit as well. Definitely. You know, I will openly admit that I got pretty darn lazy when it comes to just various things in Pandaria, as I think many people did. But you know, I got lazy, and it's time to not be lazy, and certainly one of the things that has improved my gameplay the most in the last while is the Warlords of Draenor beta, because I've been trying out loads of classes so I understand more classes, but also it's just dealing with mechanics that matter more, and you know, in content where you're scaled to the level where you're just a little bit too weak for it. And that's been a great learning experience, and hopefully a similar thing will happen to the wider player base, and everyone will get better, and it could be great. So yeah, there you go. Let me know what you think. If you're in the beta, do you agree with this kind of need for the player base in general to up its game a little bit from the past standards? If so, let me know in the comments, but yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.